This video recording is for Dawn at Tapestry Institute. This is the Iinisskimm story that I shared during our consultation in New York as an example of indigenous pedagogy in action. And it goes like this. Back in 2005, we had begun to take our students out onto the land to visit Atapisco sacred sites, places with a living presence throughout Blackfoot territory. One of the places that we went, not far from Lethbridge, where I live actually, is known as Sundial Butte. This is near Picture Butte, Alberta. And there's a large cairn on top of a hilltop. We're not sure what the Blackfoot name of that cairn was. There is something in the literature referring to it as Okonokatsi or something to this effect, but it doesn't make sense in the language, and so we're still trying to sort it out. It's close to having some meaning in the language, but we still haven't sorted out what its real name is supposed to be. In any case, we took our students to go visit this cairn, and down below the cairn, on the flats leading toward the river coulees, were these old campsites with evidence from the camp being the old momapis, the teepee rings. And we had with us Ghana elder Bruce Wolfchild, Makoi Poka, which literally translates to Wolfchild. And this is who you see here. This is a picture that I took the day that this happened. And I was sticking to Bruce, just following him around because I wanted to hear his interpretations, what he was seeing as we visited the site. And one of the first places on the flat that he led me toward was this rock that he's standing behind. And he says, let's go look at this Iinisskimm. And Iinisskimm in Blackfoot translates to a buffalo stone. And as you can see, this stone resembles a buffalo calf lying on the ground. So let's go visit this Iinisskimm. So we went to look at the Iinisskimm, and he told me, well, let's look around on the ground, around the outside of this buffalo stone, and maybe we can find some of the smaller Iinisskimm. And I knew what he was talking about. There's a charm. There's a stone charm, and actually I had been transferred one probably 8 years prior to this experience. It's a spiritual item in the Blackfoot tradition. It's a charm used to call the buffalo and good fortune in general these days. So anyway, Bruce said, let's look around the outside on the ground here, and we might find some of those small Iinisskimm. And I know that this is not really where you find Iinisskimm, generally, the small little stones. Those small stones are bacillite fossils. They come originally from this animal. It was kind of like a nautilus, prehistoric nautilus of a sort. And their fossils are still all around our area. When you find them coming out of the cliffs, they look like this. They come out of a kind of a dark soil matrix, along with ammonite fossils and other things. And if you're down by the rivers, you can find some of these dark soils in places, and you might be able to pull some of these bacillite fossils out like this. You get a long segment like this, which we kind of refer to as fish. These long segments. You break off the pieces of the fish, and you have these different stones that look like little animals of different sort. A lot of them look like bison, but in this particular picture, you see a lot of them looking like various different animals. You got legs and a head and tail and this kind of a thing going on. And so these end up being used as charms in the Blackfoot tradition. Some of them might be made into necklaces like this. And in fact, this is very much like the Iinisskimm necklace that I had transferred to me before this trip out to this site with Bruce. And when I was transferred the Iinisskimm, I was given a song, the Iinisskimm song, which I learned, and I was told about the origin story of it, that it had come in a time of starvation, and there was a woman down by the river picking gini, like the rose hips, and she heard this song being sung to her, and she looked around and she saw this stone on a log, and the stone in the song says, "Woman, pick me up, I'm powerful." And so she picked it up, and then it gave this gift to her of the Iinisskimm, which she was able to bring back to the people, back to her husband first, who was an Iinisskimm, who took care of a beaver bundle. And they, that evening, hosted the first Iinisskimm ceremony to call the bison in for the people. And the bison, there was a lone bison that walked through the camp that they warned not to kill that lone bull, because if you killed the first one, and this is kind of a traditional food ethics, if you killed the first one, then the others wouldn't come. So you let the first one pass, and then then the herd came, and they were able to lead the herd where they wanted to hunt them. So this was the story as I knew it, and I'd been told that these small stones are a reflection of the larger stones, like this on the prairie, and that when you have those small stones, those small Iinisskimm, in your smudge box, for instance, where you do your prayers, your prayer altar, you would rest it on a bed of sage and gampstan, which is a hard buffalo dung from a healthy buffalo, not a diarrhea, but a nice hard healthy buffalo dung, and on top of that buffalo shed fur, and then you put your Iinisskimm on top of that. And that this was representative of these larger stones, because around these larger stones the buffalo would come to rub, and you would find gampstan, and you would find the wool and sage and these kind of things in the past. So this is what you were representing in on your prayer altar. So I was told all these things, but it never really hit home. And then Bruce was telling me, well, let's look for these small Iinisskimm around this rock, around this buffalo stone. So we looked. I humored him, because I knew we weren't going to find any. This is not where you find those fossils, right? So we didn't find any. He was picking up a rock here and there and looking at it and saying, oh, that's not quite it, and putting it back down. After picking up a few, he said, well, maybe we're not going to find any here, but I bet if we just follow this way down into this draw, there's going to be another boulder, another buffalo stone. Maybe we'll find one there. And I don't know how he knew that, because you couldn't see it from where we were standing. But we started walking in that direction toward the draw, toward the coulee. Sure enough, there was another large boulder, much larger than this actually, and there were signs that the cows had still been using it and rubbing on it themselves even today. There were areas of the stone the boulder that are worn very, very smooth. And so Bruce tells me, well, let's look around this one. Maybe we'll find some of those small Iinisskimm. So again, he was picking up stones and looking at them, turning them. And this is kind of like one, but this is not quite it. And again, I was humoring him, knowing that this is not where you find Iinisskimm. And after picking up several little stones and then not being the right thing, Bruce says, well, maybe we're not going to find any today. And he tells me, come. And we walk back up on the flat. And up there, he says, I'm going to sing you part of the song. And he sang me the first half of the Iinisskimm song that I'd already had transferred. And I didn't want to tell him, yeah, I know that song and I've been transferred Iinisskimm. I know all about it. You just don't do that in our ways. You don't say that you know stuff, right? You don't never say I know, because then you stop learning at that point. So I didn't say anything. He just sang me the first half of that song, and then he says, well, when you find an Iinisskimm, come back and I'll sing you the other half of that song. And so I went away, and I went away kind of thinking, this is where some people have gotten upset with me in the past, but I went away thinking, what's wrong with Bruce? Like, why doesn't he know that that's not where you find Iinisskimm, is on the ground around these big boulders and this kind of thing, that you find them in the coulees? And I was kind of thinking, that Bruce didn't know what he was talking about. It was enough to really hold my attention for a few days. I kept coming back to this in my mind, this event, and thinking, why did Bruce do that? Look for those Iinisskimm around those rocks. It's that's not where you find them. And so I kept coming back to it, kept thinking about it, and finally it kind of sunk in. I don't know what it was, but after about 3 days, it sunk in, the idea that those small Iinisskimm are a reflection of these larger boulders. And it started to hit home for me what a massive change that would have been in people's lives, in the distant past, thousands of years ago we're talking, when at that point, up to the Iinisskimm, before the Iinisskimm, human beings had learned how to hunt bison from the wolves, and they used wolves' methodologies to hunt them. And once the Iinisskimm presented itself to that woman, suddenly they were able to call the bison in. And it was not, we're not talking about symbolism and magic here. We're talking about a bison on the prairie is going to see this rock in the shape of a buffalo calf, and it's going to be attracted to it. It's going to come over to look at it. And when it realizes this is not a calf, it's going to, continue to do its thing, its bison thing, but it's probably going to see that next big boulder down in the coulee a little ways. And so it follows down that way. And pretty soon it's in the draw, and it's able to be hunted. So in other words, these large Iinisskimm, these large stones, this stone was selected to be at this site for a purpose, because of its appearance as a bison calf. It was set up this way. It didn't just happen to be here. And people started using them, and they started using them to be able to call the buffalo toward buffalo pounds like this, where they could basically, impound herds of bison and and feed whole camps with a lot more ease than they were doing before, where they're picking individual bison and group hunting them like the wolves. So very, very different technology had been born in that origin of the Iinisskimm, and that the significance of that technology is recognized and held sacred in the form of these necklaces and other Iinisskimm in people's smudge boxes that are used ritualistically. But the serious Iinisskimm is this. This is the technology, and this was, it just never hit home. And even saying it myself, I don't know if it's going to really hit home for others. What a massive, massive, important experience this was in Blackfoot history. And you notice that it's not considered a discovery in the Blackfoot sense, but it's that the Iinisskimm presented itself to the woman. And so this became the new hunting methodology. And I learned something about Blackfoot education, and I went back to Bruce with my idea, with my epiphany of the importance of these stones. And I told him I found the Iinisskimm. There it was. There it was right there. We were looking at it the whole time. And he said yes, and he sang me the other half of that song. And then I went back to the elder who had originally transferred me the Iinisskimm, and I told him all about this experience that I'd had, the epiphany and all of this. And he told me, actually, there are many Iinisskimm songs. I just gave you the one, but there are many. So he started teaching me more Iinisskimm songs that I didn't even know existed. In fact, there's quite a few people that don't know that there's actually a lot of Iinisskimm songs. They just know the Iinisskimm song, just in the same manner that I did. And so, this experience and my ability to really have that original transferred knowledge find anchor in a lived experience that helped me see and appreciate a greater depth of what we were dealing with here, what the Iinisskimm were, opened up another level into the Iinisskimm that I didn't even know existed. That's a hidden level. So this is my example of one example, and I have several, but this is one of the good examples that I have of a indigenous and Blackfoot, in particular, a pedagogy, a way of teaching others that is not just giving answers, but sometimes hitting them with riddles and misunderstanding, and allowing people to struggle for as long as it takes to figure out the answer. And a lot of them might not even recognize the riddle and might not even pursue an answer, and that's fine. So that's the story that I shared, and so Don, there you have it. You might not want to transcribe it word for word, but polish it up a little bit. I'm just speaking off the cuff here. So, all right. Hope that helps with the report, and I'll talk to you soon.